What's up, guys? Welcome back. This is a recap video for my second game in the Westchester Chess Championship. When we started the game, my opponent was an older gentleman, and he showed up to the board with a walking cane, and he made a joke saying that the hardest part is actually getting here, which implied that it's easier for him to play chess than to walk. So first of all, props to him for showing up to play at an advanced age. Hopefully when I get to be his age, I'll still be playing. Now on the board next to us, there was a young child, I think probably about 8 or 9 years old. So it's really great to see chess being enjoyed among all ages. I also play table tennis, and you see something similar at a table tennis club where young kids play with retired people. You can also enjoy that your whole life. I also play poker, and one of the useful skills at a poker table is to try to understand your opponent's tendencies. If you're facing a big bet, you want to know if how likely it is to be a bluff. So a good rule of thumb is that younger players tend to be more swashbuckling and like to be aggressive and bluff, and older players tend to be more conservative. But we'll see in a minute, despite playing an older player, he was anything but conservative. He was out to get me. So without further ado, let's hop into the action. I'm playing with the black pieces. My opponent played knight f3. And I usually respond with f5. Now I've had this position many times, and at least 3 or 4 times my opponent has sat there and thought for a couple minutes before playing the move e4. Now if someone thinks for a couple minutes on move 2, it's usually a bluff, and it's an opening they know quite well. Now this is a very complex gambit. While he didn't play e4 immediately, he played in the same style. Now incidentally, I usually respond to this position with my own surprise, which is e5, which transposes to the Latvian gambit. Let's go back. He didn't do that. He played d3. I developed my knight, and now he played e4. Which has a similar theme. I took it, and he played knight g4. Now, he's essentially gambiting a pawn. Now, of course, I could take it, but this would lead to a lot of tactical problems. For example, he's threatening to take on h7 with his knight and try to checkmate me on g6, so I didn't go for that. I just decided to develop. I played e6. He took back with the knight. And bishop e7, whereupon he traded. Now this position has appeared 3 times in the Masters database, with all 3 players playing queen h5. Now this wouldn't have bothered me that much. Of course I can just defend with g6 and I should be okay. But he played knight c3. So despite only being on move 7, it does appear that this is a brand new position, which is pretty unusual. Now with the pawns of the light squares in the middle, I felt the best course of action would be to fianchetto my light square bishop. Now the engine, incidentally, wants me to play d5, and we'll see why in a minute. Now this does appear unintuitive because it's leaving me with a backward pawn, but I do believe this was the correct move because he immediately played knight e4. I castled. Now, I would have actually been happy if he traded off the knight for the bishop, because despite the fact I'm giving up the bishop pair, I have a huge lead in development. But he actually made the right choice, which is to leave the knight in the center and just always be threatening knight takes f6 for the next several moves. So he played g3, bishop b7, bishop g2. Of course, now he's threatening to win a piece by capturing on f6. And then taking on bishop b7. So I put a stop to that. Developed a piece with knight c6. c3, another good move from him, which blocks my access to the d4 square. He's also preparing d4 himself. Now there's a couple ways to develop my queen. One thing I did consider was actually getting it out this way to try to aim for the g6 square, where I thought it would be well placed. But eventually I thought it's best to just put it on e7 and connect my rooks, and he castled. So now we've come to the end of the opening phase, and it's time for me to think about a plan. And actually, if you look at the position, it's pretty clear white is a bit better. So he has the two bishops and a little bit more space, and it is difficult for me to come up with a good plan. Eventually, I decided that it was best to focus on my half-open f-file, and I played rook f7 with the goal of swinging my other rook around and just doubling up on my one open file. Now here he played a surprise. He developed his bishop to f4, which is, of course, attacking my c-pawn, so I have to do something about that. There's only one move that really makes sense, which is e5, and he retreated to e3. So now that my pawn is on e5, I thought it's actually best to play for center control of d5. Of course, this makes more sense now with my pawn on e5. By the way, I started to regret not actually playing d5 sooner at the beginning and preventing his knight. Now we can see just the power of the knight just sitting on e4, where I constantly have to worry about him taking on f6. Now, if I were to prepare d5 immediately with rook d8, this runs into a tactical problem. So first he can take the bishop on f6, and no matter which way I take back, if I take back with either the pawn or the queen, he's able to skewer me. And if I take back with the rook, he's able to skewer me this way. So I couldn't do that immediately. I also considered moving my queen up to e6 to prepare support d5, but that runs into another tactical problem, knight g5. The computer, the engine doesn't like this move, incidentally, but I'd have to give up my bishop. So in the end, I decided just to stop both of those tactical ideas with h6, which protects the g5 square from both his knight and his bishop. This can also be a useful move later in the game to provide luft for my king. So he played another surprise, h4. And it wasn't really clear to me what the idea was. So typically when you play h4, the main idea is to try to go for h5, which would support a piece in the g6 square. But it doesn't appear to me that any of his pieces are likely to, or at least his knight is unlikely to get to the g6 square. So I continued. So now I can play rook d8, because with the g6, the g5 square now protected, if he were to take my bishop, of course I can now recapture with the rook. But he played b4, so he's attacking on both sides of the board. I continued with my plan, d5, he captured, and he played a4, which is very aggressive. I mean, now he's played a4. He played b4, now a4. Now he is actually threatening a5, which would open up, which would try to open up the file for his rook. Now, if I were to close the file by responding with b5, that would leave the c5 square very weak, where he could hop in with his bishop. So I didn't want to do that. I ended up playing a6. With the idea that whether or not he plays b5 or a5, I have the same response. He ended up playing a5, and I moved my knight to e7. With the idea that after he trades, everything is protected. So my queen protects the b6 pawn, my bishop protects the a6 pawn, but most importantly, I'm keeping a watchful eye on the c5 square and preventing him from entering. And now I played f4. So again, very aggressive play for my opponent. He played e4, a4, b4, a4, and now f4. And I went with my original plan, which was to swing my knight round to f5, go after the bishop. I'm also attacking the g-pawn, and I'm also giving threats such as d4. Now he thought actually for a long time here, the The engine prefers FE, which I would take back. But he actually played Queen E1, which essentially protects both the G-pawn as well as his bishop. And now here I had my longest think of the game, and this turned out to be my only move that the engine marked as a mistake. It was very difficult to find the correct move here. So first I'll go over what the engine move is, and I'll show what I was considering. This is a very unusual move to find, but the engine likes e4. Now the reason why this is unintuitive is because when you only have one bishop, you want to keep your pawns on the opposite square of your bishop, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to move them to the light squares. On top of that, I thought that if he traded, this pawn is essentially isolated and will probably become a lemming. He has ideas of moving his rook, and I'll almost certainly lose it. Now the flip side is I actually do get a very active rook on the d file, so I can easily infiltrate and come after his pawns. So this is a very difficult move to find. I did actually give it some fleeting consideration, but I rejected it pretty quickly. One of the moves that I had considered here was Queen G6, with the idea that I'm both attacking the G-pawn as well as putting pressure on his D-pawn. But I was afraid that he would simply capture on the E5 square and follow it up with D4, and he would have a protected passed pawn. In the end, I ended up making, again, my only mistake of the game, really, which was D4. Now, there are two variations that I had to consider. One was that if he captures on the D file, I could take back. He would have to move his bishop back, probably to D2, and I would get control over the E square, the E file, and have moves coming such as knight E3. He'd also have to keep a watch on the G pawn. So I thought this was very good for me. The other variation that I had to consider was FE, which I would recapture, and this would actually set off a very lengthy but forced sequence. So I would trade queens, and it actually doesn't, he can take either way with his rook. So I would trade this. So I was expecting something like this. So despite the fact I had to calculate about 8 moves deep, it's a relatively easy calculation given the fact that almost all the moves are forced. And if we reach this position, despite the fact this should almost certainly be a draw between two good engines. In fact, I think even if one side were to lose one of their H-pawns, for example, this should still be a draw. But I really like my chances here. I thought my endgame technique was pretty good, and I would definitely play on for a win, especially with an outside pawn. But actually, what happened was, let's go back. So right at this point, instead of playing bishop takes on d4, he ended up playing bishop f4, which is just a mistake. This led to a couple of mistakes in a row. The game actually completed pretty soon afterwards. So I took his queen, he took back, I traded bishops, and I took on c3. He doesn't have any great moves here, but he decided to go after the c-pawn, whereupon I took another pawn. He played another poor move here, bishop e5, whereupon I finished the game. Knight e3 check, forking king and the rook, whereupon he resigned. So somewhat of an anticlimactic finish, given the fact we had a relatively exciting and well-played opening to middle game. Now the engine gives me a much better score than last week. So I played a looks like 93.6, which is in fact above my level. So if you remember last week, I played in the 70s, which was below my level. So it was nice to have a rebound. Again, I only made one move that the engine marked as a mistake, which was d4 towards the end. And it also gave me a excellent score for playing the middle game. So I'm pretty happy. I have a nice comeback this week. Again, props to my opponent for kind coming to play chess at an advanced age. Hopefully I'll still be playing chess at his age. And I'm going to bring the video to a close. We hope you're enjoying the recaps, and we will see you all in the next video.